A billionaire thought he had built the perfect home. But one afternoon he stepped into his garden and froze. There on the ground was his maid, on her knees, chewing grass with tears rolling down her face. At first he thought she had lost her mind. But the truth was far worse. A cruel rule had been enforced under his own roof, and a sacrifice so heartbreaking it made a powerful man fall to his knees. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is. Now let's start. From the street, the Whitmore house looked flawless. White pillars, tall windows, and a garden cut so tidy it seemed unreal. People who passed by assumed the home was full of joy. But inside, that perfection was bought with a hidden cost. A cost paid by those who worked there. Amara, the maid, checked her uniform in the hallway mirror. Her hands shook, not from laziness, but from hunger. She had not eaten properly in 2 days. Her stomach ached and her legs felt weak. She tried to steady herself and walked toward the kitchen. She thought only to take a small sip of water, anything to calm the pain. But a cold voice cut through the air. "Where are you going?" Mrs. Whitmore stood at the kitchen door. Her robe was silk and flowed around her like a curtain. Her lips were painted and thin, and her smile was sharp. "I was only going to—" Amara began, voice small. "To what?" the woman snapped, stepping closer. "Don't tell me you thought you could take food from my house." Amara lowered her eyes and clutched her apron. "I wasn't. I swear I—" "Don't lie to me," Mrs. Whitmore hissed. "I told you when you were hired. Servants do not eat our food. Not leftovers. Not crumbs. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Amara said, barely breathing. Mrs. Whitmore poured her coffee slowly and let the roasted smell fill the room. "You are paid to work, not to eat," she said. "If you are hungry, bring your own bread or go without. It is not my problem." Amara's eyes burned with tears, but she kept silent. Silence was safer, kept the sharp words from getting worse. Hours passed. She scrubbed floors, ironed suits, and polished silver. Her movements grew slow and heavy. Every task felt like it used up the last of her strength. She carried laundry up the stairs and her head swam. Her body screamed for a scrap of bread. By afternoon she could not stand any longer. She stepped into the garden and sank onto the grass. The lawn was soft and green, but her hands trembled as she pressed them to the soil. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't do this anymore." She tried to breathe slowly, but the hunger burned with each inhale. In a moment of despair, she pulled up a handful of grass and shoved it into her mouth. The bitter blades tore at her tongue, but she chewed. It was something, anything to quiet the ache. "Why am I like this?" she cried into the dirt. Tears mixed with the soil and made little dark patches. She kept eating, driven more by fear than hunger. If she lost this job, her son would not survive. She had sent every naira she earned back home. Footsteps came down the stone path. Amara froze, hands full of grass. "What is this?" a voice asked. Mr. Whitmore stood on the path. His suit was dark and neat. His shoes shone. But his face was not the calm face he wore in the boardroom. It was raw with shock. "Amara," he said slowly, "what are you doing?" She scrambled to her knees and tried to spit the grass from her mouth. "Sir, He stepped closer, confusion and anger rising in him. "Why are you eating grass like an animal? Explain yourself." Amara wanted to speak, but fear sealed her lips. Mrs. Whitmore's threat rang in her ears. "If you tell him, you will be fired. How will your son eat then?" She bowed her head and could not look at him. "Sir, please," she whispered. "I can't." "You can't what?" he demanded. "Speak." He gripped the air between them as if it could pull out answers. She stood silent. The wet sound of the sliding door opening made both of them look. Mrs. Whitmore walked onto the patio, cup in hand, barefoot on the stone. She looked at the scene like she watched a play. "What is going on here?" she asked, voice flat. Mr. Whitmore turned to her, his face ashen. "I just found our maid on the ground eating grass," he said. Mrs. Whitmore lifted her chin and swept a hand. "She's a servant," she said. Servants do not eat what belongs to us. If she is hungry, she should bring her own food. We do not tolerate mess." He stared as if the woman was a stranger. "You have been forbidding them from eating in my house?" he said slowly. "You call this cruelty standards?" She shrugged like it was nothing. "If they are too proud to bring bread, that is their problem. We pay them. They should be grateful." Something in him snapped. "This is not gratitude," he said, voice breaking. She was eating grass. She was starving. "Stop being dramatic," she said. "They are just servants. They come and go." His voice rose, full of pain. "Don't you dare say she doesn't matter." The birds in the garden stopped singing. He turned back to Amara. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice soft and urgent. Amara sobbed and told him everything. "She said if I complained, I would be thrown out," she cried. "I send all my wages home. My son is sick. If I lose this job, he will die." The billionaire stumbled back as if struck. His hands trembled and his throat closed. For the first time, the life he had built felt small and hollow. He looked at his wife and then down at the food she threw away. He felt sick. Food he had never seen, fresh and plentiful, tossed into the bin like trash. And outside, a woman chewed grass to quiet the pain. He walked to the bin and opened it. He lifted a container and held it, heavy with fruit and rice. He felt shame like a cold hand on his chest. He dropped to his knees beside Amara. He did not care how he looked. He put his hand on her shoulder, awkward at first, then firm. "Forgive me," he said, voice raw. "Forgive me for not seeing. Forgive me for letting this happen in my house." Amara wept, but she did not move away. For a moment the two of them sat on the grass, the sun warm and the air still. The billionaire's tears fell freely. "This ends today," he said. "You will not go hungry again. Not as long as I live." He stood and called the cook into the garden. He told the staff that from that moment every worker would eat from the kitchen. No rules about scraps. No rules about leftovers. He promised medical help for Amara's son. He promised to inspect the house himself. Mrs. Whitmore stood frozen, red-faced and silent. Her power had been taken from her. She had pushed too far. Word spread through the staff quickly. They saw a different man leave the house that day. One who moved slower, as if he carried something new and heavy, responsibility. In the days that followed, he visited the clinic where the boy had been treated. He paid the bills and met the family for the first time. He learned how hard the life outside his gates could be. He began to see faces rather than roles. Some changes were small. Leftover food was no longer thrown away. Meals were shared in a simple room for the staff. Wages were adjusted so families could survive. Some changes were larger. He set up a fund to help workers with medical bills. He also made sure the charity extended beyond his own house. He visited schools and clinics in the part of town where his workers lived. He learned names and stories. He met a child who loved to draw and a mother who worked 2 jobs. He listened to people who had served there for years. He saw what a difference a small act could make. Mrs. Whitmore moved out a month later. She refused to accept the changes and left with her silk robes and bitter pride. The house grew quieter and kinder. The billionaire did not become perfect overnight. He made mistakes, but the sight of a woman forced to eat grass stayed with him. It changed how he spent his money and what he cared for. He became the kind of man who checked the bins before they were thrown out. He became the kind of man who sat with staff at meals and asked about their children. He became the kind of man who used his power to make small lives safer. If the story moved you, tell us in the comments what you would have done in his place. Share this story if it touched your heart. Like and subscribe for more stories that remind us about compassion and justice. Please spread kindness to those who suffer.